Hello everyone, welcome to Hoops Official. Today we're diving into the mental side of refereeing with Sara Månsson from Sweden. Sara is a FIBA referee and she has been refereeing at the highest levels of Swedish basketball. She has also earned Referee of the Year in the Women Division 3 times in a row. We'll chat about her journey, but most importantly we'll share some easy to apply strategies for staying focused, recovering from mistakes, handling pressure and mentally preparing for a game day. This episode is packed with insights that you can apply right away in your game, so stay tuned and feel free to share it forward with your referee friends. Thank you.
Welcome, Sarah, to the show. I know you're from Sweden, and among many things I know about Sweden, it being a basketball country is not amongst them. So please, give a little bit of an intro about yourself. How did you, get into basketball, and then how did your refereeing career started afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, as you say, Sweden is maybe not the biggest basketball country in the world, for sure not. We're hoping to improve, but we're still work in progress for sure. No, but I started playing basketball when I was 11. It was actually by chance, really, because I had a fight with a friend. And I wanted to see my other friend to talk to her about it. She's like, "Nah, I'm going to basketball practice. Maybe you could join me." I was like, well, this was not what I wanted maybe from this evening, but okay, sure, I will join you. And this was when I was around 11 or something like that, 11 or 12, I think. So I joined her and I really, really enjoyed it. So I continued playing then. And then, well, as I said, I liked it. I continued playing throughout high school and so on. And when I was 16, I think it was, the local club said that, okay, we're going to aim to promote to the top division women. And they asked around in the club and asked if people were interested in joining that. And I was, because I really wanted to go for basketball and go for playing at the moment. But in our contracts, when we started playing for the women's team or the ladies team, they actually included that we had to either coach or referee. So I started coaching, actually. Which was maybe not, maybe you couldn't think that, but now, where I'm at now with the refereeing and so on. But I started with coaching, but I didn't really like it. And one of my friends that was also playing for the ladies team, she had refereed a couple of games with her dad, actually. And she asked me like, "Oh, do you want to try out refereeing instead?" And I said, yeah, why not? So when I was 17, I think I refereed my first basketball game ever. And I really enjoyed it, especially compared to coaching, to be honest. So then I continued refereeing and playing in parallel. So I think that's how it all started, actually.
Right. It's interesting because it reminds me of my, starting to play basketball experience as well. I wanted to impress a girl that I liked when I was 11.
Ah, I see.
So that's why, everybody has their own reasons, but interesting. So you tried playing, obviously you played for a while, but you also tried coaching. So how did these two affected your, transition to refereeing? You said you didn't like coaching, but did you pick up some things from there that actually help you later in refereeing as well?
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, all of these like leadership experience that you get throughout, I mean, from coaching especially, and just taking care of the kids and trying to find better ways to talk to them and communicate and, explain exercises and so on. I think that's definitely helped me in refereeing as well, and just finding a better way to talk to them and understand basketball. And I definitely think playing has helped in that as well, for sure. Yeah.
Were you a point guard, or what was the?
No, I was actually playing more like a power forward. I'm not super tall, but I jumped very high, so I was good at rebounding. That was my thing.
All right. Good that you made the decision to join the referee community. I think Europe and Sweden has, now a very high quality referee, as you're representing your country in FIBA games as well. And obviously there's a lot of things that we can learn from you. But when we talked, we decided that we want to dedicate this space for mental preparation, which is actually, I'm beginning to understand, an important part of refereeing. Emotional control, being mentally and physically ready and in the game, actually has an influence how the games and play calling goes in the game. So let's start with a very practical and pragmatic example, right? You have a game today, assuming. How would you plan your day? How do you bring that mental preparation at each step of the day?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on how the day looks or what the day looks like. I mean, I have a daytime job as well, so and we do have a lot of weekday games in Sweden. For example, top division men are always playing on weekdays, basically, and we do that in FIBA as well. So it's all about finding a good balance, really. But if I have a weekday game in Sweden, for example, I usually travel a lot. I go by train to most of my games because I mean it's a big country and we have to travel far to be able to go to the games. So yeah, as I said, a lot of traveling. But for me, it's really important to find a way to, transition from being my work Sarah and being my refereeing Sarah. I mean, refereeing is also work, but not what I'm making a living out of currently. So that transition is really important for me. And I think it's just small things that you can do that really helps you out. I mean, for example, one thing that I never compromises with is that I always go for a walk to just refresh, reset my mind, and just make sure that I get away from the computer screen for a while. Because I find it very hard to just go directly from being at a computer to being on the court and trying to referee. I work a lot better if I actually get that kind of mini break. And also, I mean, sometimes I feel very stressed out. I work in the IT business, and of course, we have a lot to do regularly, a lot of customer meetings and so on. And I can be very stressed out and very focused on my work. And if I feel that way on a game day, I always do some kind of meditation. I usually do guided meditation, actually, using an app called Headspace, which I think suits me very well. I've tried other ways of meditating as well, but I find that guided meditation is maybe the best way for me to actually do that. So just small things really that I really believe help me in, yeah, as I said, in this transition from being off court Sarah to being on court Sarah.
Right. Interesting couple things that you mentioned in there. The walk, obviously, kind of making a clear cut distinction between your alternating jobs in the day. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, you talked about the guided meditation. Just to clarify, do you do it like on a regular basis, or do you do it when you have a game and you feel stressed out?
No, I do it on a regular basis as well. I try
Right.
to do it every day if I honestly remember to do it. But I really feel like in my workspace as well that I feel a lot better when I do meditation on a regular basis. I mean, in my work, I have a lot of context switching and so on, and I feel like if I do meditation, I get more focused and I'm able to find better ways of coping with everything that's going on at the same time. So I definitely would say that I try to do it on a regular basis, but it becomes especially important on the days where I feel stressed out and unfocused. So I use it both as an everyday tool and as for something specific. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about responding to kind of situations that don't normally arise, but for a reason, let's say you're particularly stressed out and you don't have time to actually do the guided meditation. If you check like FIBA Mental Preparation Guide, you have these like small tips and tricks on breathing exercises, visualization techniques. Do you employ these in your preparation as well?
Yeah, I do. I mean, even though I wouldn't have time to do guided meditation for some reason or something like that, I mean, the guided meditation doesn't have to be super long. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I
Right.
think that if you just ask your colleagues for that kind of peace and quiet in the locker room, everybody understands that we have different pre-game routines. So I think it's just about being open and like, okay, I need this space right now. I will get back to you in 5 minutes. But
Right.
if it's not possible for some reason, I don't know. I tried the breathing exercises as well. I mean, there are breathing exercises both for picking you up and getting you more energized. And there are also breathing exercises for calming you down. And depending on what you need that day, of course, you can use different tools in your toolbox.
Yeah.
I think there are, very simple things that you can do even on court to help you
Yeah.
out in that. Yeah.
All right. So just want to build up on that. So what do you do on court specifically? So there is a lot of guidance, for example, for FIBA as to how to tackle things during a game. It starts with setting goals for yourself. For example, this game, I'd like to, focus on this aspect of refereeing. There's variety of things that you can take from there and actually do. But one thing, for example, it caught my attention, and I want to ask your opinion about this, is focusing on performance rather than the outcome. I think that's interesting because the distinction between the two is not very easy at the time. So how do you kind of see that? How does that, affect your perspective and preparation for games?
I think that's a very interesting and very important question, actually, because I mean, you can always put a goal, like, okay, I want to referee the Olympic final. Let's say that's an outcome goal, right? That's something that you want to do. The thing is that you need a plan to reach that goal and to actually make sure that you are performing well enough to be able to referee the Olympic final. And that's where these kind of like performance goals and such come in play. So for example, I mean, a few years back, I really wanted to promote it to top division men in Sweden. And I knew that there were a few things that I had to improve. So for example, getting a bit more fit, especially in the upper body, building more muscle mass, for example, become a bit faster, and then also become better at communication. And those are three things that I can work on myself and actually control myself, which I also think is a very important aspect of goal setting, by the way. Control, what can you actually control? But for me to be able to reach the goal of the outcome goal of promoting to top division men, I have to work on these three things at least and make sure that I progress every single game. So if I look at these three goals and actually work on them during the game and try to really improve on them, then I can evaluate after the game if I actually did or did not try to work on my performance goals. So for me, it's all about creating this kind of action plan. How do you reach the outcome, and what can you do to reach the outcome?
Yeah. Okay. So what do you do, for example? What are you working on yourself right now? What is the goal, and how do you actually kind of translate that to an action plan at the moment?
Yeah, so one very specific thing that I'm working on right now is that my lead position in 3PO is not very good. I don't find a good timing of the rotations. I'm struggling a little bit about where to stand and how to start. I mean, of course, starting in the basic position, but where to move after that and so on. So that's something that I'm really working on improving right now. And my plan for that is actually to, okay, I need to find good examples of other referees that do this in a good way. So watch other people's games and try to understand where and why they're standing where they're standing. Why are they rotating at a specific moment and so on? So it's all about, in this case, it's a lot about video analysis, actually. And then also, of course, watch my own games and see, okay, did I actually follow through? Did I actually work on this kind of, if I find something that I liked that another referee did I try to implement that during the game? And did it actually work for me? So yeah, trying to find these different working methods.
Okay, so we have had a kind of a little bit of segue to what happens after the game as well, a natural kind of segue. Let's continue on that. Then I'm sure we will have time to get back to in-game stuff at some point of this conversation. What do you do in between games? You mentioned video analysis. You retrospectively check your goals and how did you progress. Not just improving about your individual officiating technique, but also from a mental preparation point of view. In between games, how does your routine look like?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think meditation is one part of that for sure. But I also feel like I've noticed lately that if I feel a bit more sharp and more focused at work as well, then I actually feel better during the games as well. Because there's something about just training your mind to be more focused that I have experienced really helps me both in my work and in refereeing. So for example, not maybe context switching too much throughout the day, but finding time slots to actually work on specific tasks. And I think that that's something that we all can experience sometimes. I mean, okay, just for as an example from everyday life, like, okay, I'm watching a movie, I'm picking up my phone like every 5 minutes or something like that, and just watching, okay, did I get any new notifications? Maybe I don't have to do that. Maybe I should just train my mind to focus on this one thing, because I think that like now in this modern society, we get super easily distracted by everything. And I think that that actually reduces or decreases your mental resilience to staying focused and being more alert in general. So I think that's actually a very simple and like silly way to practice this kind of focus things.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, as you said, everybody suffers from this to a certain degree. So I think there has been a time where multitasking was a merit, but I guess nowadays with all the distractions we're getting, actually being able to focus on one single thing is becoming a skill on its own as well. And then a very important skill on the court for referees as well, to be able to keep the focus for 40 minutes or longer, depending on the overtime, on one thing that is in front of you. That's quite an important skill. So you said that, if I paraphrase, training your mind to focus by minimizing the context switches, or minimizing the layering of interactions as you do something. So these are the two things we would recommend everybody to do. Any other kind of along this vein? We could add meditation here as well. That's also being in the moment, focusing on one thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, not maybe only about mental focus, but I mean, I think it's really important, and I think we'll come to that, but like the way that you handle mistakes throughout games, that's one of my main points that I usually talk about, because it's been such an important change for me. I mean, in the past, I was kind of afraid to make mistakes. I didn't like making mistakes. I thought it was like, oh, they're gonna kill me. They're not gonna like me as a referee anymore, or whatever. But I was part of FIBA had a mentoring program for young upcoming referees, FIBA referees, that I was part of, and we worked a lot with a sports psychologist, Dubravka from and she really helped us out in finding a different way to think about mistakes that I really like, because a mistake, I mean, we're always going to make mistakes. It's always going to be there. And we make mistakes in our everyday lives as well. I mean, in my work, I also make mistakes. And one important mindset shift was for me to realize that should think about mistakes as something that you can learn from. And all mistakes are a learning opportunity that you can take something away from. I mean, for example, if you make a call that was maybe not correct, then I can always look on the video afterwards and try to understand, why did I make this kind of mistake? Was it because of my position? Did I not know the rule? Or maybe was my mindset not actually that active? And then that's something you have to work on. So for me, it's really about that. And I try to think about that a lot during the week as well. Like, okay, if I made a mistake, how can I actually take that and turn it into a learning opportunity as well? And as I said, it doesn't only go into refereeing, it's about other things as well, for sure. So I think that's a really important thing as well, to train your mind how you think about mistakes.
Yeah. So there is two things that I'd like to highlight from what you said. Number one is that, the being disliked as a referee because you made a mistake, or somebody complaining about a decision that you make. I guess we can all agree that your call doesn't need to be a wrong one for that to happen. It's very difficult to it's very difficult to satisfy all the stakeholders in a basketball court with officiating, even if you get 99.9% of all your calls right. So that's important to keep in mind, that somebody will always complain about something. Number two is this mistakes are learning opportunity. While it is a known thing, I think you highlighted a way to actually learn from it, which is this, like, when you make a mistake, don't kind of just acknowledge it and leave it, but try to understand why it happened. I think that's through video analysis. Very important. But then I'll ask you a maybe rather like a curveball question here, because at a certain level you're at right now, you have access to tools that allows you to do these kind of video analysis. You probably have coaches that tells you why something has happened as well. But you started career from somewhere where you didn't have structured access to these tools. How did you go about improving yourself in regards to those mistakes?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that, I mean, of course, I think we're kind of lucky in Sweden, because most of our games are actually filmed somehow and transmitted somewhere. Maybe it's not for free always, but there is a video of it somewhere, even on the lower levels. But I think that one thing that you can actually do is, I mean, everyone has a mobile phone, right? So at the moment, you can actually ask a friend to join you in the gym and film you. if they are interested and willing to do that. So I think that's actually one very easy thing to do. When I was younger, of course, we did not have access to videos, and we didn't have cameras maybe on our mobile phones. It was not so common then. But we had, I was quite lucky to have quite a good community of referees around me. As I mentioned, this friend of mine that brought me into refereeing, she's still referee as well, and we've been traveling all over Europe to all of these like youth tournaments and whatever, and refereed all the games that we could come across basically. And that's also maybe something where you can actually learn from mistakes, is maybe to referee a lot of games when you're starting your career. Because I mean, the more games that you referee, and for example, if you go to an international basketball tournament, I mean, there are tournaments in Vienna, Gothenburg, there was one in Barcelona when I was younger and stuff like this. If you go there, then you get to meet new teams, you get to see new things, you get to referee games that are somewhat competitive, because I mean, when you're 11 and playing in a tournament, then that's like the world championship, right? You want to win to every single prize, and that's where you can actually put yourself in situations that can be pretty tricky to referee, and maybe get a lot of external pressure and so on. So that's also one way to like put you in a situation where you probably will make mistakes, and where you can actually think about them afterwards and be like, okay, how could I have handled this differently? Even though you maybe cannot watch the game, you can still think back and try to visualize the situation that you were in, and try to like, okay, but he or she maybe said this to me and I responded like this. If I could do it all over again, what would I do differently? I do that a lot now as well, because that's something you won't get from the videos, right? Unless you're mic'd up. I mean, you are in some games, but most of the time you're not. So all of these conversation and interactions, you can still practice in that kind of way. So I think that's a very good way of doing that, for example.
Right. So that's an interesting point, because these what if scenarios, it is also like something you can do proactively before a game as well. And I think this is something also suggested by FIBA as part of the preparations before a game. So what if scenarios you go through, if you do, before the game? Is it more like conversational, like the one you suggested, or some of the referees I talk to, they invent scenarios, like, you know, some impossible goaltending situation happening, and if it happens, what do I do? You know, so how do you go about it?
I think it's a mix. I say, because as I said, when I was trying to promote for top division men, I was focusing a lot on communication, because I knew that was an important aspect for me to improve. So I've done it mainly for communication, but I also do it for game scenarios. Absolutely. I mean, there are certain situations, maybe if you do scouting for a team, for example, and you see something that's very that occurs frequently. It could be some player doing stupid stuff, maybe a troublemaker, so to say, or a player that's very bad at setting screens in a good way. I mean, you can always visualize those situations. Of course, you shouldn't anticipate them too much, because then they become a sort of fake reality maybe in the game. But you can always visualize, what would it look like, where should I be positioned to be able to see that situation, and what would I want my reaction to be if I see this kind of situation. So of course you could definitely use it for all of these different scenarios that you can come up with.
So do you, for example, if we think of the conversational part of it, can you donate us a couple of what if scenarios that you would think of before the game? Is it coach specific? Is it team specific? Probably so, if you know the teams. But if you have a couple of examples in mind, just to, you know, give people who watch this a point where to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you can use it for many different situations, but I'd say that a typical example is, for example, if you have a very big reaction to a call that you've just made. If a player comes running up to you and they want to talk to you about the situation, what do you do? I think that for me, for example, I've been trying to find a good way of first of all, not ending up in the same sort of mindset that the player is in, maybe, because the player could be pretty upset, right? So not to end up there. That's the one thing. Okay, stay calm. just breathe and make sure that, okay, what do I do when they come up to me? So, okay, the first thing is that I would want that person to calm down a little bit as well, because if we're going to end up in this mindset where you're just aggressive towards each other, then we're not going to have a good conversation no matter what. And it's not going to end up well. Even if I'm wrong or he's wrong, we're never going to get to some sort of conclusion of this conversation. So try to find a good way of doing that. And that could be, for example, just, okay, what is your question? Or maybe how would I answer what the person is saying? Okay, can you please explain it to me again? Because that kind of actually calms people down most of the time if they have to repeat what they just said, because they realize that, okay, shit, I actually have to explain this in a good way to her. She wants to listen to me. And then we can start a conversation from there. So I think that this visualization of the first initial reaction when a player comes up to you, what are you going to do? I think that's a pretty good example of how you can use that.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because the technique you use there by asking them, can you please explain to me, basically force them to switch gears from an emotional thinking to actually conscious thinking, because they now need to start articulating and making a point, which is very different from just yelling and getting your point. However, you might. So very good. Is there any has there been, I don't know if I should call it a lucky or unlucky situation where you actually visualize a situation like this and it actually happened to you on the court, or it's just general part of preparation and it just gets your mind and then the body kind of ready if so happens?
No, but I think there's been a few situations, especially when we approach like the playoffs, because that's where it gets more intense, maybe especially in terms of communication. There's a lot more pressure and the players really want to win the games and so on, So I definitely think there have been situations. I can't think of a concrete example right now, but when you approach the end of the season, then kind of who the troublemakers are, the teams, as you said before, and so on. So then that, okay, he or she is probably going to want to complain about something. Yeah. So I think that's like when you can actually see it beforehand and somehow, okay, he or she is going to come to me at some point during the game and say something. You can never know what for sure, but you know how they act and how they interact with you. So I think, yeah.
A side question. I don't want to distract us from the conversation around mental preparation, but I'm a little bit curious because different countries have different notoriety around how much passion goes into basketball or any sports really, and you have been refereeing games in different parts of Europe. How is Sweden like in terms of the emotional involvement from fans, coaches, and players compared to elsewhere?
I'd say that, the audience, the spectators maybe are not so involved as they can be in other countries. We've seen examples of that in the last few days in FIBA also, people throwing firecrackers on the court and stuff like this. This doesn't happen in Sweden. We had one Bengal fire during the playoffs last year and it was like, oh, what's going on? They're still involved and they're still cheering for their teams. But I think that maybe, it's not as passionate as it is in other sports in Sweden, for example, football. There it's more like in other countries in basketball, maybe. But I'd say that the players and coaches are absolutely emotionally involved, absolutely. And we also have a lot of foreign players coming here, for example, and foreign coaches as well. We have coaches from all over Europe, players from the US, from Europe, and so on. So I think that they absolutely show different levels of emotional involvement. But I also have to say that a lot of the Swedish players do. So I think it's, from the player and coach side, it's still a lot of emotions.
I'm always curious to hear, in this up and coming basketball nations, how the culture evolves, because it doesn't have historical roots. So it's interesting how that goes compared to another country where you have years of tradition around basketball. All right, now bringing it back to these, actually it's quite relevant to what we just discussed, the emotional involvement. So referees, as you said, can make mistakes, and it triggers an emotional reaction from the coaches, players, if it is an obvious mistake, or if they catch it. How do you, and this comes back to this micro mental resilient situations, how do you recover if you know that you've made a mistake on the court?
This is a very important aspect of refereeing, I would say, because I mean, of course, if I dwell on my mistakes during the game, then I'm not going to be a good referee for the rest of the game. If I make a mistake and then I just think about that, then I'm going to be out for the rest of the game, and that's not fair to my colleagues or to the players or the coaches or the audience even. So I think this is really, really important. And for me, as I said it before, I think the first step is to shift your mindset about mistakes and try to find another way to think about it in general. Then of course, when you're in a game, maybe it's easy to say like, oh, this is a learning opportunity, I can watch it afterwards, blah blah blah. Yeah, of course, but you also have to find this way of actually taking your mistake, and this is something that Dubravka told us during the mentoring program that I really, really like take this mistake that you just did, put it in your pocket, and then after the game you can think more about it, because you cannot have it open in your mind all the time during the game, because then you will become a worse referee. So just put it in your pocket, and then when you're ready after the game, you can pick that up and think about it and understand and analyze, why did it happen, what can I do differently next time. So I actually use that quite a lot. And try to put it away for now, at least.
Right. Yeah, it is one of the things that when I hear it, it totally makes sense. Sometimes the practice of it, especially if you're up and coming referee, where you maybe deal with a certain amount of confidence issues on the court, it can overwhelm you. Although you know that you shouldn't dwell on it. Have you had any mistakes, during your career, especially on the early stages, that kind of stayed with you for a while? Do you remember anything of that sort before you learn how to deal with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it happens a lot when you're up and coming, for sure. I mean, in the past, when I was just promoting to second division men in Sweden, this was pretty early on, and I was having a game, and I was very unfocused. I remember this game very clearly because I was unfocused. It was something about, I think I was very stressed out at work because I was doing my PhD at the time and I had a lot to do. And I wasn't there mentally. I hadn't been able to. Maybe I hadn't found like all of these strategies that I'm talking about now already. And I come to the game. I'm not really there mentally. I'm not focused. I'm not ready to referee the game, to be honest. And I made so many mistakes throughout the game. And once I had done the first game or the first mistake, I felt worse and worse and worse, and that led me to doing even more mistakes. And I remember afterwards when watching the game that I was like, this is not me. I don't even recognize myself at this point, because it's so far away from what I would want to be as a referee and where I want to perform. So it really had me thinking about, what can I do differently for next game, not to end up in this situation again? So I've definitely had those games, and it's never easy. And as I said, this is a game that I still remember and have pretty clearly in my mind when you ask the question. So absolutely.
Yeah. This reminds me a couple of anecdotes I read from the book. I mean, obviously this happened to me as well as a referee, and I try to understand why it happens the way it happens. Apparently it's called choking, and I don't know if it's a slang term, but it is called choking. And then I guess the point is that you start thinking more about the mistake that you did, instead of focusing at the task at hand, the next action and the next action. Everything starts to go downhill from that moment onwards. So it's important to kind of isolate that moment of the first mistake if you can, and as you said, put it in the pocket. It's a difficult job, right? I mean, we go through all these mental and physical hoops in order to make it happen. And we know that at the end of the day, still there will be people who are not happy with what we do. So what are the driving forces behind this? Why do we do this? Why do you do this? What keeps you going?
I think that Well, first of all, I just want to highlight something in what you just said, because one thing that I had to learn the hard way when I was doing my PhD is that, because when you do a PhD, you get very scrutinized by people around you. You get scrutinized in what you do on a regular basis. They read your papers. Are they good enough or not? No, they're not, maybe, or maybe yes. We don't know before someone else has read them, right? And for me, it's been super important to just disconnect this. Your performance is not your self-worth. And I think that's really important to think about when you do this kind of work. And that really goes into refereeing as well. Just because you make a mistake one day doesn't make you a worse person in any way. And I think that's a really important disconnect to do. And I just want to say that, because I thought about it when you said this about performance and so on. And that's something that you have to work on actively, actually. And I worked on that very actively during my PhD, and also now during refereeing as well. So yeah, that's the first point I want to say. But back to your question, maybe about motivation and so on. I think that, well, first of all, I really like basketball or refereeing. I think it's great to go into the gym and I mean, being on court during a game where you feel like you're both in control, but the game is also challenging. That's an amazing feeling to me. I really, really like that. But I would also like to say that, I mean, if I ever was to have a perfect game, I would probably stop refereeing. A game without mistakes, where everything just went smoothly, where everything went the way that I wanted, I would probably stop refereeing, because I would never reach that again. So for me, one driving force is also to continuously develop and improve throughout. And that's been a driving force for me ever since I was a kid, actually, like in school, and then during my studies at uni, and then my PhD, and in my work life as well, to find this kind of continuous development. So that's a driving force in itself for me. So yeah, there's always something to improve, right? No matter what level you're at. No.
Yeah. So referee is a little bit like, you know, masochistic in the sense that as long as there are mistakes, as long as there is somebody complaining, it's worth
Yeah, exactly.
again and again. All right. So we're coming to the end of this very nice conversation. Thanks, Sara, for, you know, the insights that you provided on mental preparation. I'd like to close it by asking you a free form advice that you could give to young referees. And when I say young, I don't refer to the age, but early in their careers.
Yep. I actually think that this about mistakes, how you deal with mistakes and how you can learn from them, is one of the most important aspects that you can start working on very early in your career. I think that's, I think that we in general can benefit from being a little bit less harsh on ourselves, maybe, when it comes to mistakes, and try to learn from them instead. So definitely that's one point. And maybe the other point that I want to say is that there are many things in this life in refereeing that you cannot control. For example, what nominations you get. I mean, in the end, there's someone else deciding that, right? All you can do is to focus on what you can control yourself. How you should be able to be eligible for a nomination, let's say. What do you need to improve? What can you do to do that? Don't focus on everyone else. Focus on yourself. That's how you get better in the end. So those 2 points: mistakes, and focus on what you can control.
Actually, there was 3 points in there. So learn from your mistakes. Don't be harsh on yourself. I would, you know, separate those. And the third one is that focus on things that you control. All right. Thank you again, Sara. It was a pleasure having this chat with you.
Yeah, thank you too. It was great.